It legitimately feels almost like Christmas morning, doesn't it? Doesn't it a little bit? We have college football back. It is finally here. We are 24 hours away from Iowa State kicking off against Kansas State, 22 Cyclones against 17th Wildcats in Ireland, season opener, rivalry game, conference game, playoff implications. It feels like already all this chaos happening just 24 hours away. We have made it. Welcome, everyone. There should be like pyrotechnics or anything going off right now. But welcome, everyone, to the program. I'm Justin Miller, your host of the Media Row podcast, which is always sponsored by Kelly's Little Nipper and Stevens Automotive and Sales. Always thankful so much for their support and your support, the listeners, which you guys, again, we'll get to what you guys have to say about your predictions for Iowa State and Kansas State. But again, thank you so much for participating. It's great to see when we put something out on Twitter that in just a blink of an eye, we have over hundreds of views. So it's great to see, love to see it, and keep it coming. And if this is your first time with us at the Media Row podcast, welcome. And hope you enjoy it, where you get to follow along all throughout the football, basketball season and all year long round, as we're always here Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays on the Media Row podcast. You can get it on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. YouTube, make sure to subscribe, comment, rate, all that good stuff. But now, since we got all that maintenance work done there, let's get into so much of what we've all been eagerly waiting for. We had Cole Carmarty from 24/7 Sports with Kansas State on Monday. If you missed that, go back and listen to it. Wednesday, we had the voice of the Cyclones, John Walters. If you missed that, go back and watch or listen to it. So today, it's just you and I. Today, I'm going to give my thoughts on this game. So much. This is going to be a blast. So much to dive into. That's why I really wanted to have Cole and John on, because I wanted both sides for just my own personal need of figuring out this battle, because on paper it is just a toss-up to me. So we'll get into that. And then I have down a few final preseason college football topics I want to get into, including, a team I have in mind that I think is going to take a huge step up. And then also the best weekend of college football. So if you have any weddings in the fall coming up, just scrap this weekend. Make sure you tell everybody, hey, I'm not leaving my couch for 24 hours. Just make sure they understand that. And then we'll just finish up today's show with our predictions and all of that good stuff. But first, before we get into any of our predictions and previews for Kansas State and Iowa State, need to give a shout out to Kelly's Little Nipper at 1701 East Grant Avenue in Des Moines. Kelly's Little Nipper, proud sponsor of the Media Row podcast. They were the very first place that believed in us, so we appreciate their support, and we want you guys to go support them because they have great food, great drinks, and even better community, and they support local events. They are sponsoring Drake football. They are here for live and local music on the weekends. They have trivia nights on Wednesdays. They have great food. They have everything you would want. And they're also giving you guys great deals. It starts here with the whole keyword thing. So Jeff and I came up with, hey, we should start doing keywords a few months ago. You remember we did like free cheese balls if you use the keyword Hendo. That was a few months ago. This one I came up with, sent it to him, and I was expecting a no, and he said, let's go for it. So you're welcome, guys. Here you go. Use the keyword Woodley. Yes, Woodley, as in Joe Woodley, the head coach for the Drake Bulldogs. And your first drink is free on the house. I mean, there you go. You don't need any more motivation. You have a great game this weekend. Go check it out over at Kelly's Little Nipper. Have a free drink, have great food, great laughs, and much more. Over at Kelly's Little Nipper, 1701 East Grant Avenue in Des Moines. When you go, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. So here we go. Let's get into our predictions, our preview. First off, an overview of Iowa State and Kansas State. 22 versus 17. Iowa State preseason ranked 22, Kansas State 17. The Wildcats right now favored by 3, but man, it's a toss-up. In Ireland, 11 a.m. kickoff. Let's just get into kind of our overviews. Like I said at the start of the show, I had both expert in Kansas State and Iowa State on because I wanted to do this with the first game of the year of just kind of give you guys, hey, this is what to look out for both teams. So what I learned from Cole with Kansas State is, first off, they're returning quite a bit. And it's mostly on that defensive side of the ball, and it's mostly, some big names that a lot of people are interested in. So on the offensive side, though, you always have to get started with a strong quarterback, and that's what they have in Avery Johnson, one of the more athletic players in the game right now, starting off in year 2. Year 1 was still a success. Over 2,700 yards passed, 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and we'll get to those interceptions in a bit. But he also got it done with his legs. 605 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns. And they just spread the ball efficiently in 24. But it was Jace Brown who really stands out, who comes back. He had 823 yards, 5 touchdowns a year ago. And then this is going to be a great tight end matchup. This is one of the positions that I'm really excited to watch for on Saturday because Iowa State, they have tight ends that are really healthy. And we saw how good Iowa State was a year ago when all their tight ends were not even remotely close to being at 100%. Kansas State, when you have a quarterback that likes to move around in the pocket, it's nice to have a safety net guy. Well, they don't use them just as a safety net. They use Garrett Oakley as really a third wide receiver. He's almost a wide receiver 3. But 236 yards, 5 touchdowns. Now, they do lose some key parts on the receiving end. Number 2, Keegan Johnson, transferred to New Mexico. And then they lose their starting running back in DJ Giddens. He's with the Indianapolis Colts. But they have depth in both of those positions that they're losing. We talked about the wide receiver position. When you're bringing back a guy like Jace Brown, in this day and age, when you're able to keep a guy like Jace Brown who had nearly 1,000 yards receiving, even though you're in a Power 4 conference, it is one of those things you worry about each and every year. At the end of the year, you go, man, that guy had a great year. Does someone pick him up? So Kansas State being able to retain some of those guys, and mostly in Jace Brown and Garrett Oakley, really important. And then depth at running back. Their starting running back, who you should expect to be your starting running back, Dylan Edwards, he ran for 546 yards and 5 touchdowns a year ago. So offensively, really strong. But defense, they bring back a lot. And that defense last season in the Big 12, one of the more consistent and just physically intimidating defenses any team in the conference had to go up against. They ranked 6th in yards allowed, 343, so kind of middle of the pack. But against the rush, this is where they stood out. 2nd in the Big 12 against the rush in 2024. And we know how Iowa State, there's so many question marks on that receiving end that they're really going to need to get that running game going when they have 2 strong running backs in Abu Sama and Carson Hansen. But man, what a difficult task to go up against Kansas State. Once again, a rival, top 25 opponent, conference opponent in Ireland in week 1 when you have these question marks and they bring back so much defensively. And then against the pass, kind of lower on the scale, 9th in the conference against the pass. But the main concern I have with this Kansas State team, outside of all that they're bringing back, that strong defense, you have an experienced coach. It's a hell of a coaching matchup, by the way. This is what we, as college football fans, this is what you want, where you have a great quarterback matchup. You have great skill position matchups. You have 2 great defensive minds going at it and physical defenses. This is going to be bloody football game is what it feels like on paper when you look at it. But the biggest concern I have specifically with Kansas State is those turnovers. And you heard it on the shows with both John Walters and with Cole of this Kansas State team kind of shot themselves in the foot multiple times. In the games that they lost, it really came down to protecting the football. And you saw a drastic drop in performance from Avery Johnson when he would turn over the ball. Now, what I liked from what Cole said about Avery Johnson is in year 2, he has that experience. He's more mature, where now if he throws one interception, it doesn't feel like the train's coming off the rails. Now you feel like you have confidence. Last year, though, one turnover, it really changed his whole mental side. He would rush things. He was not as patient in the pocket, trying to force things to make up for the interceptions. He had 10 last year, which was tied for third most in the conference. But you're not going up against an easy defense. Iowa State was one of the better defenses last year. Now in the conference, they were lower. They weren't great against the pass, but they made plays when they needed to. And when you have a defensive mind like John Haycock, like Iowa State does, you have confidence. And they lost a lot defensively. Bo Freeler's gone. You lost Darian Porter. You lost Miles Purchase. You lost a lot as Iowa State defensively too. But you also bring back Jeremiah Cooper. You bring back some guys that you have confidence in. That defensive line with Dominique Orange is still going to be physically demanding against an offensive line like Kansas State. But can they force turnovers? Because that's huge, and that's my biggest concern with Kansas State. One last thing with Kansas State, and this will tie really quickly into Iowa State's kind of concerns in their overview. But Kansas State defensive line, as we were saying, won the best, second most in the conference in sacks last year for the Wildcats. But while that's your overview for the Wildcats, I want to go into the overview for Iowa State. A year ago, history. History was made. Most wins ever by a Cyclone team. They beat Miami in the Pop-Tart Bowl, and they returned 14 starters. And while that's more than Kansas State, I still feel like they lost more, just from a production standpoint. 5 on defense they come back with. But while you bring back a huge and vital position at quarterback of Rocco Beck, which is one of those quarterbacks that no matter who he has around him, you just have a confidence with him that, he had whatever it was, like 5 game-winning drives a year ago. That UCF one, witnessing that in the press box last year was incredible. That was a game I was going to remember for a while, or just like a single-player performance I was going to remember for a while. But Rocco Beck comes back. He has led the Big 12 in yards and touchdowns for the last 2 years. And maybe we'll save this, though, for the kind of question marks I have with Iowa State. But he brings back behind him the 2 strong running backs we mentioned of Sama and Hansen. Sama, 587 yards, 2 touchdowns a year ago. Hansen, 752 yards and 13 touchdowns. Clearly, excelled his expectations and made that gap between running back 1 and 2 really large, which I think going into the season, everyone was expecting Sama. You bring back Ben Bramer, who was not healthy a year ago. And then you have an offense that was 7th in total yards, 6th in the passing game, and 10th in the run. But it didn't feel that low. I think that's more a credit to just the offenses in the Big 12. Because, man, I thought Iowa State had a pretty strong offense. And it didn't feel like they were a middle-of-the-pack offense. But the defense we brought up, total yards, they were 9th in the conference, 15th against the run, 6th against the pass. I want to get into now the question marks that I have for Coach Campbell, Rocco Beck, and the Cyclones team. And it starts with who they lost in that receiver position. I think this is what everybody's concerned about. When you lose two 1,000-yard receivers in Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, that's huge. I mean, you look at the box score. Again, tight ends weren't healthy, and we know how Rocco likes to utilize Ben Bramer. We know that that's a key point of emphasis for this Iowa State offense is to utilize those tight ends. That's why you've seen Charlie Kolar, go pro, and you've had these tight ends really successful for the past few years. But last year, he didn't have that option. But you look at Iowa State's box scores and just the season tallies. You had Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins over 1,000 yards receiving, and everyone else was well down the line, even in targets. Like, you look at Kansas State, and we mentioned, they lost they bring back Jace Brown. They lost Keegan Johnson in the transfer, but they still distributed the ball efficiently a year ago. Iowa State, it was those two guys. That was who Rocco was throwing to. Go rewatch any of the game-winning drives. Iowa, take that for example. It's Jalen Noel for like 3 out of the 4 passes. I think Higgins is the other pass. But to get down the field in 30 seconds, he went to his reliable veterans. But now, who does he have? And I do like Eli Green. That is a name I have confidence in. We heard a lot about him a year ago, coming from North Dakota State. He had a lot of experience. His year 1 at North Dakota State, not great numbers. Year 2, explodes onto the scene. And then he comes to Iowa State and just wasn't utilized that much. Didn't need to be the main guy, which is fine. But I'm really excited to see him and Ben Bramer. And just, I want to see Eli Green perform the way we know Green can. And so that's my receiver I'm excited to watch for against Kansas State. I think he's the guy that will be kind of the go-to target for Rocco Beck out of the wide receiver positions. Again, I think against Kansas State, you go with the veterans and you try to dump it down to running backs. You try to get it in the hands of your tight ends, and you really rely on that offensive line to push forward and hold off the strong Kansas State defensive line and get the run game going with Sama and Hansen. But this goes into more question marks for Iowa State, is you lose Jared Hufford to the pros, and you bring back kind of a big and experienced offensive line. But as told yesterday, Iowa State without a left guard. Their starting left guard in Trevor Burr is out for Saturday's game against Kansas State. And that is huge. When Rocco doesn't have as many weapons or doesn't have as reliable as weapons that we know of as of this moment, you need the offensive line, and you're going up against one of the toughest defenses again. So it's just, there's a lot of question marks with Iowa State. So let's get into our first prediction of 2025. Doesn't that just sound right? Doesn't it just feel right? Oh, we're back to prediction podcast, which I love, especially this time of the year. Let's get into it. First game of the year. I should have kept a tally for after KXNO. If you guys remember, when I was on Saturday morning pregame, your boy was on top of the scoreboard. I led the predictions and had the best record in NFL and college football. Just saying. Hopefully we can keep that trend going. But let's start. The huge game. Everyone's going to be watching it. 11 o'clock in Dublin. 17th Kansas State going up against 22 Iowa State. And right now the Wildcats are favored to win by 3. I do believe it's going to be a close game like everyone's expecting. On paper, this is a coin flip. So many great headlines going into this game. You have a rivalry game, which Iowa State has won 4 of the last 5. You have 2 great head coaches going at it, 2 physical defenses, and then, 2 of the more prominent and exciting to watch quarterbacks in the conference going at it, in Rocco Beck and Avery Johnson. But my prediction for this game, I do believe it's going to be a back and forth physical battle. Both teams are going to want to get the run involved. But I like Kansas State to win this game because there's just too many question marks on Iowa State's end for me to feel confident in picking them. Now, does that mean Iowa State won't have a good year? No. Does that mean Iowa State can't figure out those issues and play Kansas State in Texas, for the Big 12 title game later on in the year? Absolutely not. I just think when there's so many question marks, who is Rocco going to throw to? You lost 2 1,000-yard receivers and Nolan Higgins from a year ago. Your 2 most reliable targets. And then, you lose a left guard in Trevor Burr, and you're going up against the team that was second in the conference in sacks. There's just too many question marks and too many where you'd feel like Iowa State would need to fix a few things or figure out their true identity too early on to take down Kansas State. I like the Wildcats, but man, Iowa State, strong defense. If they can force turnovers like everyone is saying, then they can flip this field and make it easier for Rocco, even with the question marks he has. I just think Kansas State, they know more of who they are than Iowa State does at this point in the year. I am going with the Kansas State Wildcats. I think Kansas State takes down 22 Cyclones in Dublin, and Iowa State starts the year 0-1. But that does not mean Iowa State cannot have a successful season and possibly get revenge in the Big 12 title game. So that's my first prediction of the year. I'm sorry, Cyclone fans, if you disagree. This is why we love college football, though, for games like this. Last year, the Dublin game was, Florida State and Georgia Tech, and it was a good game. But, man, this one just has more hype. And I know it's probably because of the state I live in, but just a rivalry game. Again, so many headlines. Can't wait. This is going to be so fun to watch, and I'm so excited for it. Football is finally here. We finally have, legitimate football. I'm watching Arizona and Denver Bronco preseason games. I'm rewatching football games on YouTube just to scratch that itch, and I can't wait. Saturday, Iowa State, Kansas State. We'll have, of course, on Monday's show, a recap of the game and talk more about it. But I wanted to get to, before we move on from Kansas State and Iowa State, I need to give a shout out to you guys for making your predictions. I asked for it on our Twitter page. If you don't follow us at Media Row Pod. But on Twitter, first off, over 330 people. So I really appreciate that. But 80% of you disagreeing with me, saying Iowa State's going to win. Kansas State only got 20% of the votes. So a lot of Cyclone fans really confident that they will start 1-0. I still think it's crazy that both Iowa State and Kansas State has to come back next week and play a week 1 game. But that's beyond the point. But people having Iowa State taking down Kansas State, saying I'm wrong. And again, this is a toss-up game, but I just think Iowa State has more question marks. But let's move on. So I wanted to get into some final preseason topics. We've been talking preseason all August, basically, of top storylines. Who's going to be the next Indiana? Who's your national champion prediction? All of that stuff. You've been hearing it. You've been seeing it. I just have a few last preseason topics, and then we can move on from preseason and just get into the fun stuff. But first off, I have a team down here that I think is going to really, really surprise people. And they're going to make a drastic change from 2024. I have a team down here that is going to go from 7-6 to at least 10-3. And Hawkeye fans and Cyclone fans, I already pissed off the Cyclone fans by saying they're losing to Kansas State. Now I'm going to piss off the Hawkeye fans. I got Nebraska. Nebraska, I think, at least goes 10-3. That schedule is not that difficult. That is not an intimidating schedule for Nebraska. And even for the Huskers who, like, they're one of those teams now where you kind of just expect them to Nebraska something. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Like, oh, they should win against Akron. Well, if they lose to Akron, people go, it's Nebraska. But I don't think that happens. They open up the season in Kansas City against Cincinnati. I think that's a win. Then they're at home against Akron. Then they're at home. That's a win. Then they're at home against HCU. That's a win. They're at home for 4 of the first 5 games. At home against Michigan, number 14 Michigan. Being at home's huge for that. I think Michigan wins, but I wouldn't be terribly surprised if Nebraska won that game. Then they come off the bye at home against Michigan State. I'm not big on Michigan State. They weren't good a year ago. I don't think they'll be great this year. Then they go on the road on my birthday, October 11th, to Maryland. That's a win. At Minnesota. Minnesota, a good team. Still some question marks, though. They can be a physical defense. But if Nebraska plays like how they should, when you have a second-year quarterback and an athlete like Dylan Raiola, that should be a win. The Northwestern, that should be a win. USC, another team I don't know if I'm huge on. I don't know what to expect from them. I think that's a win. I think it's a win at UCLA. Now traveling to UCLA, that's difficult. But the final 2 games at Penn State, that's a loss. And I think it's a bad loss. I think Penn State handles Nebraska pretty easily. But Nebraska could have won or be undefeated by the time of November 22nd. But I think it's like Indiana a year ago where they were really good and they were beating teams they should have beat. But when they went to Ohio State, maybe competed for that first half, but then really kind of got swept. And then Iowa, that's a year after year. That's a toss-up game. But that's at home. That's a home game too. Their toughest game in Penn State, that's on the road. Their other 2 toughest games are at home. So I think at least Nebraska goes 10-3, making a drastic improvement from 7-6 a year ago. And also what gives me confidence with this outside of the schedule is Matt Rule as a head coach. Matt Rule has experience of really making some major turnarounds from year 2 to year 3. So he starts his college career at Temple. Year 2 in 2014 as the head coach for Temple, 6-6. 2015 the next year, 10-4. Baylor, second year in 2018 as the head coach, 7-6. 2019, 11-3. Nebraska, 7-6. 2025, what do we have in year 3? And I think 10-3. That's my team that is going to make the biggest jump from 24 to 25. And I think it's Nebraska. I know a lot of people have Washington as kind of that Indiana team to make a huge jump. I just don't know much about Washington, but I have confidence. It kind of pains me to say, but in Nebraska, I do have confidence. To finish up today's show, we're going to do the best weekend of college football. So mark down September 27th as you're not leaving the house. And that's just a great weekend in sports. I think there's a couple of really big key matchups. I think maybe like Ravens and Bills play that Sunday, but you have the Ryder Cup as well. So it's just a great sports weekend. But to focus and centralize on college football, tell everyone. Text them. Tell your girlfriend, wife, fiance. Tell everyone you're not leaving the house September 27th. Because you have games like this. Number 9 LSU at 21 Ole Miss. Not missing that one. That game could go to 1,000. Number 7 Oregon at number 2 Penn State. Great game. Could be a possible Big Ten championship level game. Then you have the kings of the SEC, Bama and Georgia, 8 versus 5. And you have an Alabama team that there's a lot of pressure on. We were just talking about, man, you look at Nebraska, you can make that jump from year 2 to year 3. For Alabama, you have to be in the college football playoff and probably win a college football playoff game from year 1 to year 2. And that's crazy. But it's the pressure DeBoer and all those guys at Alabama have, thanks to Saban. And then you have Ohio State at Washington. If everybody's hyped on Washington, that could be a possible upset on the road for the Buckeyes. Then here in the state, you have Indiana going up against Iowa. Indiana, 20th in the country at this moment. Just a great weekend. An absolutely fantastic weekend of college football. And there's so much more to be had. So I am so excited. I can't wait. This weekend, I'm actually off to Wisconsin. I'm going to go see Lambeau Field for the first time ever and see my Seahawks in a preseason game go up against the Packers. Yeah, it's preseason, but you know what? It's still football. I'm excited to go see it. I've never seen Lambeau Field and want to see the Hall of Fame, want to experience it all. So probably we'll have photos from there. Don't worry, though, because it's a 2-hour drive to get there from my brother's place in Madison. I'll have the Cyclones game going, and no matter what bar we hit, we're watching Iowa State, Kansas State. I'm not missing that game. We are going to watch that game. So I can't wait to watch that. I just so giddy. If you can't tell already, I feel like all 3 of these shows this week, I have been speaking at 1,000 miles per hour. But happy opening kickoff of college football of 2025. Cyclone fans, enjoy it. Hawkeye fans, I mean, maybe you'll enjoy it if Kansas State wins. But just everybody sit down, grab some junk food, and enjoy some college football. We have a lot of fun to get to next week, though, as well. But before we give that preview, need to give a shout-out to Stevens Automotive and Sales, 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive in Johnston, Iowa. 35 years of family-owned and operated in the state. Loyal people communicate so well with their customers, and there's no BS involved with any of it. Best place to go for an oil change. Best place to go to sell your car, to get a starter car for a family member. No matter what you do, they're the best place to go to because they care just as much as you do about your safety on the road and about affordability as well. So go check out Stevens Automotive and Sales, 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive. 35 years of family owned and operated here in this state. And when you go there, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. So a quick recap quick preview, I should say, of next week. We're kicking off with a reporter from 24/7 Sports that covers Ohio State to talk about the biggest game of week 1, number 1 Texas on the road at the Horseshoe against number 3 Ohio State. We'll talk about that on Monday, as well as just kind of preview the Big Ten as a whole. And then Wednesday, our first Wednesday with Coach Woodley, as he gives us a preview of Drake's home opener against Upper Iowa. And then Friday, we'll recap with Coach's interviews from the Drake Upper Iowa game, as well as give our predictions. So much more fun to be had. Please join us, follow us, like us, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next week on the Media Row podcast.